everybody, and welcome to Project HR, a podcast dedicated to building better workplaces. I'm Jennifer Oraqua, COO of Projections, and your host. And I am so excited because earlier this year, we began our Best Practices in Employee Relations series, a series of episodes featuring interviews with movers and shakers at companies you know and love to find out how they handle this critical topic. In the last episode of this series, we spoke with Stephanie Miller, who is the Director of U.S. Associate Relations at Lowe's. And in this episode, we are so pleased to be joined by Kristy Martin, Vice President of Labor Employee Relations for Nestlé. This award-winning global nutrition company recently grabbed the #1 spot on Fortune magazine's World's Most Admired Companies list. And in 2020, they were ranked as one of the world's best employers, as one of the best employers for new grads, and as one of the world's most valuable brands by Forbes magazine. Recently, Nestlé USA and Nestlé Purina Pet Care also earned top scores in the Corporate Equality Index. And last, but definitely not least, this year, Nestlé was also recognized in the Bloomberg Gender Equality Index for its transparency in gender reporting and advancing women's equality. Kristy, clearly Nestlé is doing some amazing work. We're so pleased to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
So in our previous episode in this series, we focused on the ways a North American company addressed employee relations. So what are the challenges presented by employee relations in a global company like Nestlé?
Well, Nestle is the world's largest food and beverage company. We operate in nearly every country in the world. We have almost 300,000 employees, so we're complex. Our product lines are wide and varied. And in the United States alone, we actually have 8 different operating companies. But all of that complexity aside, employee relations in its simplest sense is about creating and maintaining positive relationships in the workplace. And that's a concept that's universally understood. So it might look a little different from country to country, but really the value itself doesn't change. And in a global organization like ours, it's important that employee relations be based on core values, but also respect the unique customs and cultures in all of the different countries in which we operate. And from the beginning, Nestle's simply been about trust, respect, and dialogue. And we work closely with our employees all over the world to foster that culture.
So clearly, all of this informs the idea of developing best practices in employee relations, as well as in other areas. But I've seen Nestle's employee relations policy. It's 8 pages long. How were you able to synthesize such a compact policy to cover all employees at such varied locales?
It's a great question, and while I can't take credit for writing it myself, I can say that, like many of our other guiding documents, our employee relations policy was not written in a vacuum by 1 or 2 people.
Sure.
Rather, it was crafted with diverse input from all around the world, and it was written with the intention of being succinct, understandable, and applicable in any geography. And so when it comes to that employee relations policy, by keeping the focus on the what and the why and not prescribing in detail how we get there, it's actually quite easy to remain compact and also be applicable everywhere.
That makes so much sense. So building a positive, healthy, and a safe workplace also becomes exponentially more difficult when you work on a global level. Laws and regulations, of course, they differ from country to country, and certainly concerns vary. So what does this mean for you from an employee relations perspective?
Well, for me, working in the United States, it means that we must follow the employment laws and regulations of our country, which are ever changing in the US.
Right,
We all
right.
know.
Yep.
But also, at the same time, it's important that we ensure that we align with our principles as a broader
hmm
organization. And we don't necessarily limit ourselves by what's required under the US law. So, an example of what I mean by this is our parent support policy. Nestle provides a benefit that allows primary caregiver employees to take an 18-week paid leave when they welcome a child. And we extend 4 paid weeks to the non-primary caregivers. It's a policy we're very proud of. It's
hmm
gender neutral. We respect that families are diverse, and the policy actually includes a number of other benefits beyond just that paid leave alone. And I think we all know that there's no federal mandate for paid parental
Right,
leave in the
right.
United States. And a benefit like this is not common in our country.
hmm
So that's what makes us so proud. And that's what I mean when I talk about our not limiting ourselves by what's required under US law, because we've rolled this out to employees around the world, including the United States, because it aligns with who we are as a broader organization. And in fact, our parent support policy is an extension of the mission of our founder, Henry Nestle. many people don't know this, but he actually developed an infant cereal over 150 years ago to help save the lives of malnourished children.
Well, that's interesting. Well, and clearly, compliance with the law is just like the basic minimum. And you guys have won so many awards for employee care that it makes sense that you would go above and beyond that. But, labor relations in a global organization is substantially complex. So what's different about labor relations when you work outside of North America?
Yeah, complex is a great word for it. It definitely differs from country to country, whether that be in terms of working with labor unions or working with work councils, which are very predominant in other parts of the world,
Mhm.
collective bargaining, maximum work hours that may be allowed in certain countries, and other aspects of labor relations. So there are definitely distinct differences between the United States, where we're guided by our National Labor Relations Act, and the laws and regulations that, let's say, our European counterparts follow.
Mhm.
But in spite of that, the work that we do might look different here than it does in, let's say, France.
Mhm.
Our commitment to freedom of association is universal, and
Mhm.
our values of trust and respect and dialogue don't change. And you'll see that emphasis really across all of our geographies in Nestle. You will see that where employees are represented by a union, you'll see it where they're not. And where we have employees that are members of a union, we collaborate with that local union, and we consider them a stakeholder with that same focus on trust, respect, and dialogue.
I love that. I mean, it's just part of your core values. It's built into everything you do. I love that. So, did Nestle's union sites operate any differently than your non-union sites?
Not really. I would say our union sites do not look significantly different from our non union sites, whether that be in terms of how we operate, how we interact with employees, even the benefits we provide. Quite similar across our organization. And I think it's largely because of our global organizational values, which apply to all employees, whether they are
Mhm.
represented or not.
Mhm.
And actually, an example of what I mean by this is the parent support policy that I mentioned earlier. We rolled that out to employees across the United States, including our union sites.
Hmm.
And while I think it's fair to say a lot of US companies would not have done that, they would have held on to a generous paid leave benefit like that for labor contract
Mhm.
negotiations.
Mhm.
We recognize the value of extending it to all of our employees across our network, including those that were represented by a union. And that's something we're really proud of.
I'll bet. Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Christy, it's time for us to take a quick sponsorship break. But when we return, we'll learn more about how Nestle approaches employee relations both here and abroad. So, stay with us.
We'll get back to these tips in just a moment. But right now, let's talk about you. Because when your company is going through any kind of crisis, you need to know that your leaders are in alignment. So check out abetterleader.com to deliver fresh and powerful new leadership topics every month. Just minutes to get started and to start supporting your company's engagement goals. Again, you'll find that at abetterleader.com.
We're back with Kristy Martin, the Vice President of Labor and Employee Relations for Nestle. So, Kristy, at Nestle, when your employee relation efforts begin with any new employee, do you begin at onboarding or does it start even earlier than that?
Earlier than that. If we want to unlock the full potential of our people and our teams, it begins long before an individual is hired. It's about what we do as an organization to attract a diverse pool of candidates, and it's about our hiring process, getting to know the candidates to ensure we're bringing the right people into our
Mm.
organization.
Hmm.
And then once they join the company, it becomes about making sure that we properly introduce them to their role and also to Nestle as a whole. We hired them for a reason, and we
Sure.
want them to know that they are welcomed, they're valued, and they're an important part of our success in the marketplace. We aim to quickly provide them with the right environment, opportunities, and resources to feel both connected and engaged.
Excellent. So what does Nestle do after onboarding to keep that positive employee relations going?
Well, we don't have one magic answer to that. I truly believe when it comes to employee relations, there's no one action that's going to deliver
Sure.
an engaged
Right.
workforce.
Right.
Proactive relations really has to be woven into what we do every day. It's in the decisions we make, it's also in the actions that we take. And I also firmly believe that employee relations cannot realistically be owned by any one group, such as HR.
Hmm.
My team might carry the employee relations job title, And we certainly focus our efforts and our work in this area, and we make sure that employee relations is top of mind throughout our company. But employee relations extends far beyond our team. It has to be part of what we do across the organization, whether we are supervisors, HR professionals, or frontline employees.
Interesting. That's a really interesting approach. So you mentioned earlier that Nestle maintains a wide range of operating companies. Can a single approach to employee relations serve all of those companies?
I do not believe that it can. While there are many best practices that we share across Nestle, there's really no one size fits all approach to
Hmm.
employee relations. Our 8 different operating companies in the United States each have their own special focus in the industry. They also have their own unique heritage,
Hmm.
and we don't want to lose sight of what makes them unique. And an example of this, our Nestle Purina pet care business, obviously pets are our passion in that part of
Sure.
the
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at our St. Louis headquarters, you will see dogs and cats around campus as employees bring their pets to work.
Nice.
Huge, yeah, it's a huge part of the culture at that site.
Yeah.
Bringing a dog to work encourages employees to get outside and take walks and interact with their colleagues. And studies have shown that employees who bring pets to work actually show fewer signs of stress.
Hmm.
And having been on that campus myself many times, I can tell you it is hard not to smile when you walk past someone's cubicle and there's a furry little
Yep.
face peeking up at you with the
Yeah.
tail wagging.
I'll bet. I'll bet.
Yeah, so that's unique to the heritage and the culture of Purina, but it's very different from what you'll see in, let's say, our Nestle Nutrition Gerber business, which is all about babies.
Hmm.
Fremont, Michigan is the place where Dorothy Gerber founded our baby food brand over 90 years ago, and we still manufacture in that same town today.
Hmm.
So we partner with the community every summer by sponsoring a national baby food festival. It draws thousands of people to participate in things like a baby crawl and a baby food eating contest. It's quite unique. And our participation not only gives back to the community there, which is certainly rewarding in itself, but it's also a fun way for our employees to get engaged and show their pride for who we are and what our focus is in the Gerber business, which is all about baby.
I love that. And that emotional connection is so important when people feel connected to their work and, like you said, the heritage of each business unit. But how do you measure the success of your employee relations efforts?
Well, just like I believe there's no one magic bullet for employee relations as a whole, I don't believe there's any one action that delivers an engaged workforce,
Hmm.
nor is there one magical metric that measures it. So when you talk about uh, metrics with people in this field, you'll hear a lot about turnover rates and absenteeism and survey results,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
you'll hear about
Yep.
external reviews and all those sorts of things, and they're all important. But even more important is that we look beyond those numbers and peek under the hood, so to
Hmm.
speak.
Okay.
So an example would be high turnover. That might point to a problem, certainly, but high turnover itself does not mean you have a disengaged workforce. Maybe you had a lot of retirements. Maybe people
Hmm.
left for reasons that had nothing to do with your business, and the numbers alone won't tell you that. But on the other hand, if people are leaving your company to take a similar role at another company elsewhere, that's
Hmm.
probably worth digging into a little
Right.
deeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, so I actually have a story I can share about metrics
Oh,
from
yeah.
my early days in HR. This
Yeah.
is what I always think back to when I think about managing metrics. So I used to be in HR at a union factory, and I
Hmm.
was told by an auditor who, on a side note, clearly came from an auditing background and not an HR background, that I should be tracking the number of grievances filed by employees as a key metric, and I should have a goal to reduce my number of grievances by a certain percent every year.
Okay.
So, as this naive, dutiful young HR professional, I did exactly what the auditor told me. But
Hmm.
I quickly realized the number of grievances being filed wasn't really all that significant.
Hmm.
Some grievances had no merit, some were simply a misunderstanding of our labor contract. But so I realized that what was more important was determining how many of those grievances were actually sustained, meaning we as a company made a
Hmm.
mistake and had to correct some sort of an action that we took.
Hmm.
And then I also determined that even that number, the grievances sustained, was only valuable if I did something with it. So
Hmm.
I
Sure.
took an action. Yeah, so I took an action to review the root cause of our grievances. I discovered that almost half of our sustained grievances at that time were due to overtime issues.
Huh.
Our process was complicated. There was no secret. Our process was complicated. It was cumbersome. It was confusing to both the supervisors who were trying to manage it and the
Mm-hmm.
employees. So we were getting grievances related to overtime. So I worked closely with our production manager at the time, and we created a matrix to clarify the process, to try to take some of that gray area out. And we ran it by the union stewards, made sure that they understood the process the same way we did. And then once finalized, we posted that matrix so it could be easily referenced at any time. And very quickly, we saw a significant reduction in our overtime grievances because
Mm-hmm.
people better understood the process. So to me, that's an example of what I mean by looking under the hood.
Yeah,
If I
digging
would have
deeper.
simply, yeah, if I would have had just, okay, I have 20 grievances this year and next year I have 18, that to me, that's pretty meaningless. But it
Yeah.
was when I dug deeper into the numbers, figured out what was causing those grievances, and then took an action that I was able to deliver true results.
Yeah, and that kind of insight is just invaluable to actually know the cause of those grievances, not just measuring numbers. So that makes perfect sense. So you did mention at the beginning of this that employee surveys as one means of measuring employee relations. Does Nestle conduct employee satisfaction surveys? How often do you do that if you do?
We do, yes. And our most notable one is actually a survey that we call the Nestle and I survey, and it's administered globally.
Mm,
So it allows us across the globe to measure whether our employees feel engaged, whether they believe they're fairly compensated for the work that they do, and also whether they feel they have the right knowledge and skills and tools to carry out their responsibilities.
mhm,
It's a large global survey, so it's done not every year, but on a periodic basis. Our U.S. employees participated in the Nestle and I survey in 2016, and then again this year. And then as an organization, we conduct smaller, what we call pulse surveys in
mhm,
between the larger Nestle and I. We have it administered by a third party. Confidentiality is critical, as it should be in any such survey.
mm,
And really, the results are invaluable. It allows us to see our strengths and our gaps, and we can break it down by geography, by operating company, even by department. But the survey alone isn't enough. Much like other metrics, it's really how we come to understand those numbers and what we do with the findings from those
mhm.
surveys that really matters.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you communicate the results of the surveys to employees? Do you tell people what's going on, or do you take action around those? How does that work?
Absolutely. The most important part of employee relations work with any survey happens after the data is collected. That's the easy part. It's so important that we quickly communicate the results to employees, even the not so good stuff, right? We can't
Right.
sugarcoat it.
Right.
We got to be very transparent,
Yep.
and then we determine the root causes, which sometimes takes some follow up, maybe employee focus groups, things like that, and set action plans then against the gaps that we find. It's important that we involve employees in those actions, in those solutions, and that we regularly communicate our progress throughout. It shouldn't be just a one time communication to employees, but they should be able to see the progress we're making against any gaps that we identified. And if we fail to do any one of those things, we're better off not doing the survey at all.
Yeah, for sure. Because that transparency and authenticity, I mean, that's what builds trust between employees and their company. So that makes a lot of sense. So, what about employee recognition? What role does recognition play with your employee relations strategy?
Well, it's no secret that employees want to feel valued. I
Yeah.
think we all do.
Yep.
And it's certainly no secret that employees who know they are appreciated are happier and are more productive.
Hmm.
Research has proven that time
Sure.
and time again.
Yeah.
So, of course, recognition is an important part of employee relations. And like other topics that we've discussed today, there's really no one size fits all approach to recognition. While some people would love to be publicly recognized in front of their peers in a meeting for an
Hmm.
accomplishment, I know other people would find that horrifying.
Yeah.
And one thing that's great about Nestle is, as a company, we don't prescribe any one way of recognizing employees. You will see variety across our businesses. A number of our operating companies use what we call a real recognition program. It's a web based program that enables us to recognize peers, direct reports, even cross functional colleagues. Some of the levels of this web based recognition program include points that an employee can save up to redeem for tangible items like Bluetooth speakers or travel certificates and things
Oh,
like that. And
nice.
yeah, it's been very well received by
Yeah, I'll bet.
employees.
Yeah.
Now, Our Purina business, on the other hand, utilizes a different reward system called the Five Talls Recognition Program. And this ties back to heritage. The term Talls is credited to Purina's founder, William Danforth. He published a motivational book back in 1920 in which he wrote, "I dare you to stand tall, think tall, smile tall, and live tall." And his words are actually engraved on the ground of our St. Louis campus, and they became the foundation for our Five Talls recognition program.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, all that said, though, I really believe recognition has to go beyond formal programs. It needs to be embedded in our everyday, how we interact and how we thank people, even in informal ways. And effective appreciation has to be authentic,
Mm-hmm.
purposeful, and specific.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a family member who said to me, I'll let this person remain nameless, but has said to me countless times with a roll of the eyes, because he knows that I work in this field, "Well, got another one of those 'thanks for all you do' emails at work today." And we chuckle about it, but really, I agree with him that widely blasted generic thank you emails are really not all that valuable if they're broad and they're not tied to
Right.
any specific behavior or accomplishment. And too many of those emails, and the effort really just becomes meaningless.
Right. And I love how you're tying recognition in with the heritage and the expectations of each individual culture. That's really fascinating. And like you're saying, no one size fits all, but this approach does fit all. So I love that. So a lot's been said about the importance of meaningful work and the role that it plays in keeping employees happy and productive. Does Nestle's employee relations strategy involve helping employees find meaning in their work?
Absolutely. I recently read an article, this was on the SHRM.org website,
Hmm.
that pointed to a 2017 study conducted by Better Up Labs. And it said that 9 out of 10 professionals would sacrifice 23% of their future career earnings for work that they feel is always meaningful. 23%.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that statistic to be very startling, but I also think it serves as a reminder that we owe it to our employees to help them connect the dots between the work that they do and the value that it brings to our mission as an
Hmm.
organization.
Hmm.
And it actually takes me back to an experience I had when I was working with our Nestle Health Sciences business. That part of our business makes, among other things, nutritional products for patients in hospitals. And
Hmm.
I was always proud of that. I mean, how could you not be proud of that? But
Hmm.
that pride grew exponentially the day that we invited the parents of a young child to present in one of our town hall meetings. They told us with tears in their eyes how our product was their daughter's sole source of nutrition as she battled a serious illness. And they expressed how grateful they were for the impact that we were making on lives like hers. And
Wow.
I still get goosebumps today when
Yeah.
I think about it.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the kind of meaning that I want all of our employees to experience. Whether they're involved in a new breakthrough product in the pet industry, or they're making chocolate morsels that would allow families to bake cookies together, or helping nourish the lives of babies, my hope is that every employee feels that sense of connection and pride.
Hmm.
And making sure that employees know the importance of what we do and how they contribute to that is to me an essential part of our employee relations strategy.
Yeah, that impact is just so meaningful to employees across, I'm sure, across the board. So, Kristy, I think we need to take a break. We're going to take a sponsorship break. I'm sure our audience needs a breather. That is so much good information that you've shared with us. So, we're going to take that quick break, and we'll be right back after this. You're listening to the Project HR podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Oraqua, and our guest today is Kristy Martin, Vice President of Labor Employee Relations for Nestle. And we're back. Kristy, how would you rate the success of Nestle's employee relations strategy as a whole?
I'm incredibly proud of our organization and the work that we do. When I look at our employee engagement numbers from our surveys, I see that so many of my colleagues feel the same. When I read Glassdoor reviews that say things like, "This is an outstanding place to work," or I meet an employee that's been working with us for 20, 30, even 40 years, I know we're doing something
Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
But that said, employee relations work is never done. We
Hmm.
welcome new people into the company every day. Our goals as an organization shift, and we all know the world around us is ever changing.
For sure.
Ernest Hemingway once said, "It's good to have an end to journey toward, but it's the journey that matters in the end." This is one of my favorite quotes. And to me, it's what employee relations is all about. Our goals drive the direction we take as a company, but it's who we bring along on our journey and how we travel there together that really leads to success.
Are you hiring? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'll help direct you to the right place for that. We're always hiring.
It just sounds like you've really got the employee relations on lock. It's really fascinating to listen to everything you have to say here. So I have to ask, did your employee relations strategy change in response to COVID-19?
Great question. So 2020 has certainly been a year to remember.
Sure.
Uh, yeah, and it definitely COVID-19 threw some curveballs our way. But our purpose as a business, which is really to enhance the quality of life for everyone, became more important than ever. And I was humbled by how our employees across the company stepped up to make sure that our products remained available to feed people and pets all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
That said, COVID-19 did create some complexity for us. And in safety and health, which are always top of mind, took on new meaning. And we
Mm-hmm.
quickly worked together to implement practices like increased hygiene in our facilities, mask usage. We introduced additional health and welfare benefits, free COVID-19 testing for employees. We even
Oh,
introduced
wow.
a mindful meditation app because we knew people were more stressed out than
Sure.
normal during
Yeah.
this period of
Yeah.
time. And then employees that could shifted to working from home. Business travel was curtailed. And so our day to day became significantly different in
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah, as did everybody. But it sounds like you took really good care of your employees along the way. And I even saw a post on LinkedIn. Another Nestle employee posted that they had received like a care package at their home that was it was hand sanitizer and a mask, and I think it was a thing of cookies. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So in times like these, when so much is uncertain, do employee relations efforts take a temporary like backseat to crisis management?
Employee relations efforts should never take a backseat in times like these. In fact, they become more important than ever. With so much going on, it can be easy to let things like communication, employee
Hmm.
feedback, recognition, those types of things slide. But it really has to be the forefront of any crisis management situation. Our employees need to know that we hear them, that we're taking their concerns into consideration, and they need to know that they're as valued as ever.
Hmm.
And for us, with COVID-19, this meant listening to them, answering their concerns, finding new ways to interact with those that were working from home. We frequently surveyed employees to get their comfort level about returning to the office. And we did our best to provide them with tools to relieve stress, both inside and outside of work. And really, all of that being with the ultimate goal of making sure that everyone, whether working at home or working on the front line, continued to know the value that they bring and know that they're appreciated. And throughout it all, our focus has remained the same. We want to provide a work environment that people can be proud to be part of. And we want to do that through our values of trust, respect, and dialogue.
Excellent. So, pivoting like that in times of uncertainty certainly takes agility. How important are agility and flexibility to any company's employee relations strategy, in your opinion?
In my opinion, it's critical. And it's critical not just to an employee relations strategy, but to business strategy in general. The world is changing faster than ever, and businesses that don't have the capabilities to shift quickly and operate with great speed and dexterity will frankly not survive.
Hmm.
We look for agility when we hire, and we foster it in our everyday life.
Hmm.
In fact, when Steve Presley took on the role of CEO for our Nestle USA business a couple of years ago, he expressed a commitment to creating a workplace where collaboration is essential, courage is rewarded, speed is expected, and agility is the norm.
Hmm.
And those weren't just words, but I've really seen that in the work that we've been focusing on ever since.
Hmm.
And I think that in HR and employee relations specifically, we have to expect the same of ourselves. If we don't keep up with changing employee expectations, if we don't embrace new technologies and respond quickly to business demands, societal demands, we no longer provide value.
Hmm.
And one recent way that Nestle demonstrated this is by adding Juneteenth as our corporate holiday
Yeah.
to commemorate the formal end to slavery in our
Right.
country.
Right.
We didn't wait for it to become a national holiday in the United States. Instead, we saw a need to stand up against racial inequality in the world around us, and we strengthened our commitment to building an inclusive organization by being on the forefront.
Yeah, and again, that's reflective of your culture and your values, and just your your passion for what you do, and for Nestle, and for the care that you give for the people that work for Nestle are just amazing to me. And I know our audience is thinking the same thing. Do you care to share any other words of wisdom when it comes to employee relations with us? What have you seen
Yeah,
there?
sure. I would say that employee relations is not just about formal programs and formal measurements. It really lives in the everyday. Employees want a work environment where they're treated with consistency, where communication is transparent, and where
Hmm.
the environment overall is engaging.
Yeah.
And I truly believe it is the little things we do every day that foster this culture and that can often have the greatest impact.
Hmm.
So I would challenge everyone listening to think about what is one change I can make today personally to create a more engaging workplace.
Hmm.
No matter your role, no matter how long you've been with an organization, I promise you can make a difference. I actually challenged myself in this same way many years ago. It was following a training class that I took regarding leadership. And after some reflection about myself as a leader, I realized a gap. I had the best intentions when it came to showing people that I appreciated them, but I often got busy. And I know
Hmm.
that's like a
Hmm.
typical excuse.
Yep.
And I failed to follow through on that. And it was really apparent to me when I did this soul searching. And I left my training class that day and sat at my computer and put a reminder in my calendar that popped up every Friday. And it simply asked me, "Who have you thanked this week?"
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it was a timeout once a week to
Hmm.
stop what I was doing and focus on showing appreciation to someone I may have otherwise overlooked. It made a difference. In those
Hmm.
early days, I was still working in a factory setting, and it would prompt me to walk out on the factory floor and talk to someone that I needed to thank. Or
Hmm.
sometimes I'd pick up my phone and call somebody at another location. It has been over 10 years, and that recurring appointment is still in my calendar and still
Ah.
pops up every Friday to remind me.
So clearly that was a successful effort on your part. I like that. I like that a lot. So what else have you seen?
Well, honestly, I could go on all day about all the small things I've seen that make a big difference in our factories and our offices. I'll share a couple of examples with you. We all know that gossip exists in every workplace, and
Mhm.
left alone, it can be quite damaging.
Mhm.
And so, our HR team in one of our factories recognized this, and they created what I consider to be a best practice. They created a rumor board. They post frequently heard rumors on a bulletin board, and then next to the rumors, they communicate the facts. It has been invaluable in enhancing communication, and it ties back to our global organizational values of trust,
Mhm.
respect, and dialogue. And another example I can think of that's so simple was found in, of all places, a restroom. I was in the ladies' room in our corporate office in Arlington, Virginia, and I noticed that someone had put post it notes around the perimeter of the mirror with
Mhm.
inspiring messages like, kindness looks good on you
Uh-huh.
and slay the day. And
Yeah.
then they left a stack of post it notes and a marker on the counter so people could add more messages. And there was one particular note that stood out for me, and it said, "Thank you to whoever started this. You made my day." And I don't know who created it. I don't know why they created it, but I know that that simple idea made a lot of people smile. And months later, I'm still talking about it. It
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
stuck with me. So that is what I mean when I say little things can have a big impact. So again, I would encourage everyone to ask themselves, what's one thing I can do today to make my workplace better, to encourage positive working relationships and strengthen how we work together towards a common goal?
Such fantastic examples, and you can see that those positive examples of things that you can do breed more of them. Once you're inspired by that one idea, another one comes. I love that. So, Kristy, I want to thank you so much for being part of this series on employee relations, and I'm so pleased that you're able to join us today.
Thank you so much. I was really happy to be here.
Listeners, this is just a reminder to pick up this episode's companion guide at projectionsinc.com/podcast. In it, you'll find notes and links and more. Right now, though, Kristy, it is time for our lightning round questions. And these are questions that we ask of every guest on the podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. So the first thing we do is a topic showdown. In this episode, we've been talking about building positive employee relations on a worldwide level. In your opinion, which of these world songs best expresses your view of global employee relations? Disney's It's a Small World or Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World?
Well, they're both great songs, but I came to Nestlé almost 20 years ago from a smaller company in a small community, and places like Switzerland, where Nestlé is headquartered, felt so foreign to me. Mm-hmm. But now, working with colleagues from around the world and making work friends in places as far away as Turkey and South Korea, I've got to go with Disney's It's a Small World. But I will, however, spare you my terrible singing.
Oh, that would have been entertaining. So tell me, Kristy, what's the best book you've read recently?
I just finished reading The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. It's by Minda Harts. It was eye-opening for me and really taught me how I can be a better ally for colleagues.
Ah, that's great. I'll check that one out for sure. So what's your favorite thing about working in employee relations?
Well, I often say there is never a dull moment in what I do for a living. And as challenging as some of those moments might be, that is also what I find immensely rewarding.
Sure. So tell me, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Best piece of advice I've ever been given is we cannot control the people around us or the situations we encounter in our lives, but we have total control over how we choose to respond.
That is so relevant today. It really is. I like that. So last question, who or what inspires you?
Well, how many hours do you have for me to answer this?
It's a lightning round.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm inspired every day by people I encounter, whether it be my husband, my kids, my friends, some people I've even only read about. I'm always trying to be a better me, and that means learning from those around me in big ways and small. But I guess I'll go with my dog, Sharky, who shows me every day. He shows me every day the importance of relaxing, of playing, and of getting really, really excited about the little things.
Yep. If anybody's passionate about things, it's our puppies, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Kristy, thank you so much for joining me today on this week's episode of Project HR.
You're very welcome, and thank you so much for having me. This has been a pleasure.
And thanks to our listeners. As always, this is your reminder to grab the companion guide for this episode at projectionsinc.com/podcast. If you'd like to be on Project HR or know someone who would, feel free to email us at projecthr@projectionsinc.com. And finally, make sure you never miss an episode of Project HR. Subscribe to the podcast, and if you're feeling it, drop us a line, leave us a review, or simply rate us a handful of stars wherever you get your content. That's it from me for now. Let's make it a great day at work.